Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Konich-Yeehaw right here on the Last Choice Network. As always, I am Natalie, and I am joined by my co-host, Taylor. And today, for this episode, we have a guest with us. He is actually my boyfriend, and he's super into anime as well. So everybody, welcome Jared.
Thank you very much.
And today we wanted to talk about mech anime, which is something that Jared is also really into. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Jared, if you want to just kind of like give a little rundown of like what mech anime is.
Okay. Yeah, so traditionally speaking, or what you typically think of with mecha anime is giant robots. There's really two types of giant robot anime. There's the super robot, which is like Voltron. There's something like very like out of this world about it, and then there's real robots, which was introduced by Gundam. So it's used typically just for war. There's nothing special about it. They're just robots, and that's it. Of course, mecha is defined as anything mechanical. Mecha is defined by mechanical innovation, and so that can technically also mean androids and different things like that as well. But typically, what the average person is going to think of when they hear mecha is going to be giant robots. And that's actually one of the first things I was going to ask you guys is what's the first thing that comes to mind when you guys think of mecha?
All right, Taylor, you want to go ahead and answer that first?
The first time I watched Evangelion. Every time.
Just right.
Right off the rip, right there. Either that or like seeing Gundam Wing the first time on a Tsunami back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I would actually say that the first thing that my mind goes to is definitely Gundam. But Gundam isn't really something that I could have consumed before. Like, not really. I just know kind of what it looks like. It's really about it. But as far as like first show that I can say that I've consumed, I would also say Neon Genesis. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, one of my other questions was, what's your experience with mecha? But that basically answered that as well. I mean,
yeah.
do you guys like mecha?
Okay, on that I do like most mecha, but like Gundam's kind of getting kind of tired though on me because it really feels like they're just continuing the same thing over and over and over.
So it's really interesting that you say that because that is actually kind of exactly what they're doing. So a lot of things that they've been doing recently, like Hathaway's Flash was the movie that just came out, and it was part of a 3-part trilogy that has never been animated before. So for a while Gundam has the Universal Century, which is what you consider like mainline Gundam, and then they have like After Colony, and they have a couple of different like universes. Like I believe After Colony is what Gundam Wing is in, and so they're actually coming back to Universal Century like after they've already made all of these different universes of like, oh, this doesn't like apply to the main like canon. They're coming back. Like with Thunderbolt they did that, and now with Hathaway's Flash.
So like with Gundam, I know you have your original Mobile Suit Gundam. Like that's
Right.
the classic, the original. So where does like Double Zero and Gundam Unicorn and where do these kind of fall in line? Because that's kind of like a big thing because you have so many different Gundams. Like Iron Blooded Orphans, I know is a newer one. Yeah. Then they kind of have the more that Gundam Build was
Gundam Build Fighters.
Yeah.
Like they just... So you have you honestly you have to find a guide for it. You cannot. It's basically impossible to figure out on your own. There's, I think, about 13 different shows that are in the Universal Century. So that means that they apply to the original canon of the very original show. So Gundam Unicorn, I believe. So let's see. So Gundam: The Origin starts Universal Century. That's all about Char, and like if you didn't know, Char is the main villain of the first Gundam series. So that's all
Yeah.
about Char and like his build up to the original series. Then the very end of Universal Century is Gundam Unicorn, which happens a couple hundred years, or I think it's like 100 years after the original Gundam. But like Double O Gundam is in a separate thing. Iron Blood Orphans is in a separate universe. Gundam Build Divers actually like takes place in alternate present universe. So like IRL. So like it's super weird with some of it because like with Gundam Build Divers, or it's really weird because it's like it's real life. They're so like Gundam the show exists in Gundam Build Fighters. That's what all the Gundam are based off of.
So the Gundam Build Fighters would definitely be one that's just trying to sell itself, kind of.
Oh, it's 100%. Like
Okay.
that show has like 4 seasons, and it's 100% just about selling figures. That's it. Um, which that is actually another thing. Oh wait, actually, Natalie, before I go on, Natalie, do you like Gundam? I mean, not Gundam. Do you like Mecha? Do you like Mecha?
I like some. I like some. I definitely would say that there are only really two that I have watched that I have enjoyed. One of those being, of course, Neon Genesis, and then the other one is called Kuromukuro, which is on Netflix. It's kind of newer. It was one of those really odd things where it was like it flashes through the Netflix anime recommendation pages, and I'm like, I don't really watch a lot of Mech, but I just something about it was like, maybe this will be fun. I don't know. So I started it, and I actually really enjoyed it. And I will say that Jared knows this a lot too, because I kind of like live reacted, like while I was watching it. But a lot of the robots in it, they're not like that cool. they're not that cool, but like I was really in it for like the plot and the lore of the characters. Which like just like super quick rundown, the lore is that there's this like samurai, like a feudal Japanese samurai who gets like cryogenically frozen or whatever, and now he's in present time. And what we didn't know about Japan is that even in feudal Japan, there was an alien invasion and there were robots, and they had to and the samurai fought in samurai robots. So he wakes up, and of course like it's modern time, right? And he's freaking out because he's like, where's my robot? Like, I need my robot, which is called the Kuromukuro. And it kind of like delves a little bit into like Japanese myth, even, because it starts with this whole mythos of like ogres. Like, are ogres real? And obviously like how we think of ogres is not as a robot, but as something like more like a forest creature, I guess. But this like samurai reveals that the ogres are actually what they called the alien robots that came to attack Earth. So I just think it's a really cool like inclusion, a cool like story how it like weaves together, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that I'm really into that one.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool spin on Japanese history.
Mhm.
I actually now that you talk about it, I've realized that I've actually watched it.
I've only watched the first episode of it, but I mean, if both of you have watched it, then maybe I should give it a try. And that's always something really cool with Mecha, is that like it can be worked in a lot of different ways. So like while typically it is just like action, how it actually the lore of the mecha itself can be really interesting. Evangelion, for example, I think is a super interesting example of how like mecha exists in that world, because they're spoilers if anyone hasn't watched Evangelion. The mechas are made out of the angels. Like that's such a cool like concept of like literally using your enemy against itself.
Quick breakdown though on angels. Angels aren't what you think of like in the Bible in this show. Angels are
Oh yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
not the saviors here. They are definitely coming to kill everyone.
Mhm.
The
Just
big
to clear
aliens,
that
yeah.
up. Yeah.
Did you guys have any questions for me?
I actually, so my, well, I know that, okay, hold on, gathering train of thought. Okay, got it. Well, Jared and I have talked about this a little bit before, but we both took a an anime class. We took a weeb class in college, and a part of that class, obviously, we talked about mecha, the mecha genre, and our professor kind of described it as like having three stages, right? And so the three stages that our professor described were stage one being a person controlling a robot from the outside, so like with a remote. Stage two being a person controlling the robot from the inside. So what most of us think of when we think of mecha, you know, with Gundam and Evangelion, the person entering the robot and controlling it from inside. And then stage three is the machinery entering the person. So that's where like the cyborgs and more of like cyberpunk kind of comes into play, or androids. The big example that we had in our class was Akira. Whenever the machinery was infecting his body, so to speak. So, I guess, the question would be a little bit for Jared, but maybe more for Taylor. But like, do you think that that's like a good way to like classify to like a mecha, or like think of mecha? I guess.
I would say yes, because it's really anything robotic. So cyborg, android, like mainly heavy machinery. Anything from like when Gurren Lagann had a bunch of different types of robots, even if they were like the like villains that kind of transformed into these weird looking robots. Animes are really out there. But yeah, I would definitely say yes, because you could even consider like the androids from Dragon Ball Z into that technically, because they technically are full machine.
Mm-hmm.
See, as much as I dislike the theory, because my brain is hardwired to just think mecha giant robot. And so, like, I understand the idea of like androids being mecha as well, since mecha is just mechanical innovation. It makes, you know, because so the first mecha is the first thing considered mecha is Astro Boy. That is what's first considered as mecha. So, or as the first mecha. So Astro Boy doesn't fit into my personal category of what is mecha. Then Gigantor is the second, what is considered like my first mecha, because that happened, or Gigantor came out 4 years after Astro Boy. The concept of that is that a boy has a giant robot that he is able to control. That's what I think, like, initiated the concept of mecha. I understand, like, that androids are mecha as well. I really think that mecha was mecha became, or let's see, how do I want to put this? Mecha is what it is today because of the giant robots. I feel like if it weren't for giant robots, then mecha would just fall under the category of sci-fi. Because when I think of like androids, I think more of sci-fi than of mecha.
All right, I see. So then, okay, I'm gonna try and make some connections here. So, um, with all that being said, I wanted to bring up, because we talked a little bit about Transformers, like American mecha, if you will. So obviously, when you think of American mecha, the first thing people usually think of is Transformers, right? So you were saying that Transformers is mecha, which like makes sense. It's a big robot. I get it. It's a big robot, but would you say that a defining feature of mecha though is the human relationship to technology? So does Transformers take away from that?
So I know in an academic sense, mecha is defined as the coming together between like humanity and mechanical innovation. Though I believe that Transformers almost, with very few exceptions, Transformers is always has a human like characters with it. And so it would fall under the super robot, because there are giant robots from space. You know, they have a fantastical aspect to them. And then they always have the human counterparts with them. And so there are very few just Transformers with no human shows or like media in general. And so I think that they are actually, like, it is a come together of human and technology. It's not necessarily, it may not necessarily align perfectly with the three genres or the three like the three stages
Stages,
of
yeah.
Mecha. Right.
Right.
I mean, hell, there was actually a Transformers show where the humans actually had to be inside of the Transformers and press a button for them to transform.
Mm-hmm.
So there has been more like connectiveness within Transformers, but I can understand the argument of it not being mecha, since it's not like they are not directly controlled by the humans.
Mm-hmm.
They're just kind of cohabitating.
Mm-hmm. Right. Taylor, any thoughts?
Well, with Transformers, you only, like he was saying, you only really see like one or two seasons, maybe, or like not even seasons, like actual like time periods of where they were making Transformers. Like I think Beast Wars is one of the few times you don't see humans in it, and it definitely falls under the super robot, considering they are from space, and literally one of them is a planet.
Right.
Okay.
So
Like-
this does bring. Oh, sorry. Continue.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead. You're good.
Okay. I was going to say this does bring up something of like, my biggest thing is that I was doing some research. I was doing research up to this, and so since I see like Mecha as giant robot, but that isn't necessarily as it's classified as. It's just human interaction with mechanical innovation. What exactly like what defines mecha? Because our spaceship's mecha, because that's mechanical innovation,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not necessarily like, and that is giant mechanical thing controlled by human in an advanced state. Is that mecha?
Right. Huh.
But if you look at a lot of mecha, a lot of the robots are some form of, they kind of resemble like a humanoid figure. Like even in Gundam, they kind of resemble a human. In Evangelion, they kind of resemble a human. And then you have some of them that resemble more animalistic. But that's what you see a lot of times in mecha, is that these robots resemble like a mammal, basically, of some kind. Where a ship is always going to be a ship, no matter how you look at it. It doesn't have any kind of features that make it a living thing. Because in Mecha, a lot of times they want to kind of associate the robots to an actual living, breathing thing almost.
Yeah,
Right.
because it's the clash, I guess, the clash of nature and machine, right? The clash of the two coming together, both like visual, like actually, and then visually, to, I don't know, do giant robot things.
And I was hoping you guys brought this up because there is a show that I consider the anti-mecha. The reason for that is because, so it's called Heavy Object. It's an anime, and it's a mecha anime where all of the mechas are like shaped in a very functional way. So they're all shaped as like giant fortresses more than people. Like they're just like the main character is an orb with guns. Like it is not, none of the mech are human or mammal, like animalistic at all. They're all giant fortresses. Yet they're all controlled from a cockpit, and it is classified as mecha. So there are some things that like breach the boundary of like, this is basically just a ship, but they're like just giant robot enough to not be like, not shaped like ships, shaped like oblong objects that are like very functionally, like if we made functional mecha like in real life, this is what they would look like, because it's just these huge like fortresses essentially of like, here's a circle in the middle, here's a orb in the middle, it has 3 legs to hold it down, and there are guns lining it, the entirety of it, and 2 huge cannons. Like, that is the most functional mecha I have ever seen.
But you said it had legs, so it walks.
I actually think it might hover.
Okay, I was about to go.
Yeah.
If it walks, it's still got a little bit there.
There are some that there is one that I think it does actually walk. I know they are very like non-animal shaped at all. And so it's like, this is mecha, but at what point does a battleship become mecha?
Mhm.
Or at what point does mecha become a battleship? You know, and then at that point is, is Battlestar Galactica mecha? You know, like just different things like that.
Oh, so on that, so like Robotech definitely combines kind of the two things that you're talking about, because the robots initially are planes, the majority of them, and they transform into giant robots. So initially they start as a functional real life object, as an airplane, some type of fighter jet normally, and then they transform into their actual giant robot states. So in a way that I could see how they're starting to relate that to like more functionality, like more realistic type of robots, because today you wouldn't see, because it's not really functional to build a giant robot. The hydraulics and everything that it would take to move something like that around, it would be more cost than it would just to make something that flies with guns on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Humans are not, the human shape is not exactly optimal.
It's not. Walking on 2 legs is not optimal.
But if we could fly.
Yes, put a jetpack on it.
There you go.
All right, yeah, that's definitely...
Put a jetpack and wings on it.
Oh, yeah. Definitely an interesting thought, something that I haven't thought of. Like, at what point does something like a space battleship is like being considered mecha and all? I don't know if it has to do with like the number of people, maybe. I mean, I know that there's single piloted mechas, and there's duo. I've seen duo piloted mechas as well. I don't think I've seen anything more than 2 people, like in what we would like consider like a traditional like stage 2 like mecha. I haven't seen more than I don't know if you guys can think of one that. I guess Voltron, actually.
Yeah,
now that I'm thinking about it. Now that I'm like
Voltron.
talking. Now that I'm like talking and like processing what I'm saying, I'm actually, actually Voltron. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Well, I had one question for Jared and Taylor, if just kind of like, I guess, our closing question. And it's that, whenever you think of mecha and the mecha genre, you think a lot of like fighting. You think of the fighting robot, right? Like with their some form of, whether they're fighting other like robots piloted by people or aliens, or like there's some sort of like combat, and whether also it's hand to hand with a sword, with a gun, there's some kind of combat happening, right? Do you think that there is like any way, and this is just like something that came to my mind when I was thinking about this, but is there any way for a mecha to exist that doesn't have combat in it? Like, do you think that it would still have like an entertainment value if, I don't know, maybe the mechas were dancing? I don't know, like if it wasn't fighting, or does it not work if it's not fighting?
I think that stage 3 mecha, the like androids, things like that, don't have to be fighting. There are a couple shows about like androids that are like, oh, can this android be a human? And does it have emotions? Things like that. Those are technically mecha, and those are not fighting. Those exist. Mecha in a sense of giant robots, I really don't think that they can do anything but fight. Like, that's just kind of what works.
Hear me out here. So does the mecha have to be the robot being functional?
I would have to ask you to explain that. What do you mean by?
So, because would it be considered a mecha if the story is actually about the character that's, maybe he found a destroyed mech, Gundam, or whatever, and the whole anime is about his journey into getting this mech back to functioning state?
Oh, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good. It kind of reminds me of like a like a like a How to Train Your Dragon plot. I think that would work. I think that would be really interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Would that still be considered mecha, though?
I think it would be.
I think it would still technically be mecha. There is a giant robot.
There's a giant robot, and it's a person. It's a person, like creating a relationship. I mean, with this giant robot in the process of fixing it. Yeah, I think that would definitely work. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
I do have one final question. Hopefully.
Okay, final.
Okay, so mecha, very important to anime. Like, I mean, for example, Attack on Titan was influenced by Muv-Luv, which is a mecha. Idol anime only exists because Macross introduced idols to anime. Why do you think mecha is so unpopular now? Mecha was at its peak in between the 70s and 80s. It got a little peak in the 90s whenever Gundam Wing was on Toonami. But it's really not popular at all anymore. What do you think that is?
I think it honestly might have a little bit to do with the I guess you can think of it as like, it's a little bit of a niche genre, but also what I mean, not just like in the sense of a giant fighting robot, but like it's maybe just like space fighting, like combat isn't as, I don't know, because I would think that like, I don't want to say that space combat isn't as popular, or that like giant, like seeing two giant robots fight isn't as popular, but maybe it has something to do with the people maybe thinking that there isn't really a plot, like people not understanding that like it is more than just like watching giant robots fight. That makes sense.
I'm really gonna blame this one on Gundam, to be honest,
Yeah.
because they really push out so much mech anime, and a lot of the mech anime is, hey, this side doesn't like this side, now they fight, and it's repeatedly the same concept over and over. And like the best one for me so far was Iron Blooded Orphans. They come across a Gundam, and now they've been tasked with transporting a high value target in the what she was like the ambassador or something for the Mars Union back to Earth. So that was a cool one for me because that was a little bit different from their normal ploy of, hey, we're just going to go all out war because the colonies are now at battle with the Earth Federation.
Yep, and
we're going to war.
somehow there's Char again.
Yeah. I really think Gundam's kind of doing that to the mech, because a lot of people, when they think mecha right now, because it is one of the more popular shows, is Gundam, and that's all they see is Gundam. They don't see anything else.
I agree with
like
that. Yeah.
Neon Genesis. They don't see Darling in a Franxx. They don't see Muv Love. They don't see any of these other mecha animes, or even this new one right now that's Sakugan that just came out.
Yeah.
Like, they don't see these because when they see it, they see Gundam. That's the first thing that most people see is Gundam.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I have to agree with that actually, because I definitely didn't think that I would like Mecha because I'm like, I don't care about Gundam.
It is like the ninth highest grossing media franchise of all time. Makes sense.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. Well, I think that just about wraps it up for this episode. So thank you so much, Jared, for joining us and talking about Mecha with us. Yes. We are Konich-Yeehaw here on the Last Choice Network. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, and now we're on Apple Podcasts? We're on Apple Podcasts now. Yes. So we release our episodes every Tuesday at 9 a.m. and we will see you next time. Yeah.